It's time we check in with Namco and how their ongoing feud with Nintendo is going. Let's see here. They've remade one of their earliest Famicom hits, going directly against Nintendo's policy that Famicom ports have to be unique, and they made the PC Engine version much, much better. So that's a nice bit of spite on Namco's part. Pac-Land was originally an arcade game from 1984, and besides the cute graphics inspired by the Pac-Man cartoon and great music, Pac-Land has a good claim on the title of being the first side-scrolling platformer game. Of course, there were a lot of people who were right next to the idea. It's just that Namco seems to be the company that put it all together first. Toward the end of 1985, it got a Famicom port, and that Famicom port is notorious for being a bit of a mess. Teeny tiny sprites, platforming that felt awful, especially in comparison with that Super Mario Bros. Game that came out a few weeks before it. Still, this was the era of the Famicom boom, so that port still sold in huge quantities. And here's the PC Engine version. Yeah, you can tell the difference between it and the arcade one, but it's not that far. One of the big hurdles for people playing Pac-Land is the control scheme. In the arcade version, rather than having a joystick, there were 3 buttons on the front of the machine, one for left, one for right, and one for jump. And by default, this is replicated on the PC Engine. Button 1 goes to the right, button 2 moves to the left, and you press on the D-pad to jump. You don't have to do it this way, though. You can hit select on the title screen and switch to stick control, which I guess is joypad here. When you start the game, you are given the choice of skipping up to round 5, and every round consists of 4 stages. There are 8 rounds altogether, so 32 stages to clear the game. On every stage, all you want to do is traverse the distance and reach the goal. For the first 3 stages in a round, you're traveling left to right, and your ultimate goal is to bring a fairy back to Fairyland. At the end of stage 3, you reach the door to Fairyland, and the Queen gives Pac-Man magic shoes that let him jump in the air. Then you turn around, and in that last stage, go right to left, covering a truncated version of the stages you just passed through in order to get Pac-Man home. Since it's Pac-Man, he's haunted by the specters of those he's wronged. And many of these ghosts seek out their supernatural revenge from vehicles. Cars, buses, pogo sticks, flying saucers, and airplanes from which they drop bombs on Pac-Man. There's also a ghost that constantly pursues him, just floating a little bit behind, slowly advancing, and making it more difficult for you to double back. Of course, Pac-Man has a way to deal with restless spirits. By consuming an Energizer, the ghosts turn blue and slowly float to the ground, then run away from Pac-Man. And Pac-Man can devour them, leaving only a face behind. The score you receive from eating ghosts increases exponentially, starting at 200 and doubling each time until the Energizer runs out. Pac-Land gives you one more defensive option against ghosts. Pac-Man can now walk on them. If you jump on top of them, they can't do anything. Ghosts can only hurt you coming at you from above or the sides. Pac-Man can also attempt to fill the void inside him by eating fruit. Fruit just appears floating in the stage when certain conditions are fulfilled, and it will eventually vanish if you don't eat it. Fruit also has escalating points, though not as much as the ghost, and the value of the fruit that you can collect increases as you progress through the game. While most of the time you'll just be jumping over obstacles and dodging ghosts, there are a few distinct stage features that appear in certain styles of levels. The springboard is probably the most annoying to use because it's required to do it properly. If you jump off it while it's fully depressed, then you can tap right to slow your descent. This doesn't work with any other style of jumping, and if you don't jump off the springboard at the correct time. It's one of those game mechanics that's required, but if you're not told about it, then you'd never figure it out. On the platform stages above the water, there are ships that you can pick up that will extend small platforms. These platforms are totally unnecessary. These stages also have water spouts that shoot up, and if Pac-Man gets caught in them, then he's dragged down to the bottom. Something similar happens on stages with fire hydrants, where the water jets from them will push Pac-Man around, though these will only be fatal if they shove you into a ghost. On the house stages, there will be doors and keys everywhere. Collect a key, and you can open one door. There are way more doors than keys though, so you'll want to find a path that minimizes your use of keys. These house stages are the only ones where you're really at risk of running out of time, because you'll need to double back a lot if you're going to find a path through them. There are some hidden power-ups in Pac-Land, though again it's one of those things that you'd have to be told about. Pac-Man can push a lot of the solid obstacles like fire hydrants and cacti, but only certain ones, and he can only push them in the opposite direction to how the stage scrolls. So you always have to jump over them and then push them backward. If you push these items far enough, then Pac-Man could get a helmet that protects him from tiny ghosts being dropped from above, or he could turn invisible, which makes him invincible, but not able to chomp ghosts, or he could get his sprite flipped upside down. Yeah, that was just a goof that Namco included. I have one problem with the movement in Pac-Land, and that's how you have a ton of momentum behind Pac-Man. You really can't do any fine movement. He starts out moving fast, which is actually an improvement over the arcade game, but if you want to stop or only take one step, you're probably going further than you expect. By default, you have 5 lives in Pac-Land, and if you run out, well, then you have infinite continues. Don't think that makes it an easy game though. On later stages, the ghosts come in really thick. If you manage to make it to the end of the 30-second stage, you'll get a little ending, but then you get something extra special. Hitting start on the end screen begins Ura mode, or flip side mode if you like. This is something that Namco is going to do for a little while, where their arcade ports will initially give you a fairly faithful adaptation of the original game, and then if you beat it, a new version that changes up the game dramatically becomes available. In the case of Pac-Land, the level layouts are the same, but everything is sped up a lot. The other big difference in Ura mode is that the fairies are now baseball players and race car drivers, and the Fairy Queen has her graphics updated. If you don't want to play through the whole game to get to Ura mode, there is a way to cheat. On the title screen, hold down buttons 1 and 2 and press start, and that will take you to this hidden credits screen. Then hold down button 1 and 2 and press start again, and it takes you to a cheat menu. You can change the number of lives you receive, but the important thing is to enable skip. Now when you start the game, you'll be prompted to select what level you want, up to stage 32. With stage 1 selected, press up 10 times, and that activates Ura mode. I feel like Pac-Land is one of those games that's much more beloved in Japan than it is in the US, and the PC Engine port of Pac-Land gets its share of that love. I wouldn't call it a wildly popular game, more like one that PC Engine fans know about and will say, yeah, that's good. From my perspective, I find it kind of interesting that in 1989, Pac-Land still feels pretty relevant. A lot of platforming games at this point still haven't moved that far beyond the early days, and Pac-Land was the prototype for them. This is a really good port of the arcade classic, and you get a bonus mode with it. Pac-Land on the PC Engine winds up being, yeah, pretty good.